Today we're joined by Brian Fritz. Brian Fritz is the principal investigator for Quimahoning LLC, Cultural Resource Management and Heritage Services in Pennsylvania. He has an MS in Geology and Earth Sciences from the University of Akron, and a BS in Geology and a BA in Anthropology from Clarion University. He's the author of Shade Furnace, an early 19th century iron-making community in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, and The Scripture Rocks, Why Douglas Stallman Carved His Legacy in Stone. His articles have appeared in such publications as the Journal of the Society for Industrial Archaeology, the Pennsylvania Archaeologist, and the Journal of Mid-Atlantic Archaeology. Today, however, he's joining us to discuss the Paleo Digger, a mechanized tool for excavation of shovel test pits as deep as 7 meters for archaeological prospection. Thanks very much for joining us, Brian.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Glad to be here.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
So, I guess for the listener, we used to have to say that we're an audio-only podcast, but we are a video podcast, and it sounds like we might actually be able to put some imagery up there and maybe even a short video of the action. But so, can you describe to us a little bit about what the Paleo Digger is, what the machine is, what it's like, and how it works? Sort of what the design is, kind of roughly, and how you're using it in the field right now.
Okay. Well, many archaeologists are familiar with using the bucket auger. It's just a hand tool that usually it's about 3.5 inches in diameter, and we can auger down into the soil to see what the soil looks like before we do test excavations. Well, if you imagine that hand auger and just scale it up to a bigger size, the machine I built is, instead of that 3.5 inch size, which is, I don't know what that is in metric, but I built a bucket auger that is 52 centimeters in diameter. So it'll dig a hole 52 centimeters round. And that obviously is too heavy to operate by hand, so it's attached to a machine that has powered hydraulics that rotate that into the ground. And so when I start to dig a hole with it, I rotate and it starts digging down into the ground. I go 10 centimeters or 5 centimeters, depending on what the requirements are. And when I hit that 10 centimeter level, I stop and I rotate it backwards and the bottom of the bucket closes. That allows me to lift it out of the hole. And then that bucket tips out, and we empty the bucket into a tub where we then transfer that soil to a rotary screen that's attached to the machine as well. So we rotate the bulk of the soil with that rotary screen system, and then that tips over and dumps it out to another tub where we transfer what remains in that from that rotary screen into a flat traditional screen. So that's where the artifacts are collected. So it's a 3-step process of bringing the soil out of the ground. So while the soil goes into the rotary screen, I'm going back down for the next 10 centimeter level. Right. So it's a continuous process. And that 3 steps gives us a bit of a buffer. So for the first 1.5 meters, I'm pulling the soil out so fast that the rest of the crew can't keep up with the volume of the soil, getting it through the screen system. But then as I get deeper, it takes me longer to pull the soil up because I'm traveling deeper into the ground, and then the crew can usually catch up. So it works out really well.
And so you're like right there, we're kind of indicating that it's going quite deep, right? Like, so, if you're over 1.20 meters, and so the kinds of environments that you're using this in, would these be places where you do conventional shovel testing, or would this be, you've already determined that conventional shovel testing will not hit, sort of a glacial soil or a sterile level or something like that? Mm-hmm.
Traditionally, in upland settings where we're only digging our shovel tests down 40 to 50 centimeters, is really probably not cost effective to use a machine like this. There are some examples of different designs that probably are, but for my machine, it's designed for alluvial soils, for floodplains, or any place that it's stratified and the potential for archaeological deposits are very deep, particularly deeper than 1.5 meters, because that's where we hit that OSHA requirement for safety, either wall shoring or step back excavations. And once you have to dig past 1.5 meters, it gets really expensive to do hand excavations. So I can go down. I'm designed. I can go 7 meters with the current set of tools I have. The deepest I've been able to go so far is 4.5 meters simply because that's the deepest soils I've been on. But when you get along some of the larger rivers, my wife is an archaeologist as well, and she's worked on sites along the Ohio River where they had hand excavations, step back excavations. They were down 20 feet. It's almost 7 meters, and they were in the early Archaic at that level. They weren't even to the bottom at.
Wow.
So so the sites can be very deep along the rivers.
And so that kind of, I guess, gives us a sense of what kind of problems the machine is designed to address. But we talked to Holly Luxinger and Carl Keebler about the recent SAA Geoarchaeology Task Force statement on deep testing for terrestrial sites. And one of the points that they made was that deep testing is a valuable tool ahead of development, not so much to identify archaeological materials necessarily, but also to refine the geological understanding of deeply buried landforms. And so is that how you're thinking about your machine, or is your machine more like a shovel test pit designed to primarily recover artifacts and then think about stratigraphy? Are they inseparable? Can you walk us through that a little bit?
So historically in archaeology, it's always been difficult digging deep. So we've kind of resorted to using backhoe trenches and geotechnical drill methods to look at the soil, the depositional stratigraphy, and then use that information to try to project or predict where we would likely find sites deep, so that we're not digging everywhere. Kind of restrict our area that we're searching. With this machine, and that worked well because that was the best tools we had. But with this machine, I kind of turned that around backwards. With this, we now can actually sample the soils down deep. In the same method we would do an upland shovel test survey. We can dig in 15-meter intervals or 8-meter intervals or whatever interval you want, and we can space those out across the landscape just like we would with shovel tests. But now we can go down deep. And my thinking is really, let's use the efficiency of the machine to find the sites, and then use that. Once we know where the sites are, then we have highly targeted hand excavations that then can really explore the depositional setting in the context of that site. Instead of trying to poke around and guess at where these sites are, let's find the sites and then do the in-depth studies on the geoarchaeology in a depositional context.
Yeah. So it is being used as basically a prospection tool.
Yes.
And so you're able to control it by 5 and 10 centimeter intervals on the way down. And so is that like built into the mechanics of the machine itself, or is that like an operator control that you guys have somebody with like a stadia rod or something that's as you're going down?
So as I'm going down, the vertical movement is on like a mast, so it slides perfectly vertical. It's not like a skid steer with the arms where you're lowering the arms.
Right.
The arms of the machine that power my part are stationary, and then I have a sliding mast that goes up and down, and it's marked off in 5 and 10 centimeter increments on that mast, so I can see exactly how deep I am at any given time. And I have flow controls on all of the hydraulics, so I can fine tune how fast I can set the rate of lowering and raising. So you can pretty much dial in those right down to the 5 or 10 centimeter level. Usually on this, because the soils are deep, we're usually going 10 centimeters at a time.
Right.
If you go 5 centimeters, you're doubling the amount of times you're going in and out of the hole. So it takes more time.
Yeah. It looks almost like a little bit more like an oil derrick or something.
Yes.
The vertical setup than it does any kind of like traditional auger setup.
Yeah.
Am I right, Brian?
Yes.
You shore up the sides of the test pit using like a culvert plastic, right?
That's if I'm digging from the surface down, no. The sides stay firm enough. It really digs a nice straight hole. Now, in some circumstances, like for highway projects where we need to do contract archaeology for highways, a lot of those locations have coarse fill over top of them. And, I can't dig through chunks of concrete and asphalt. So what we do is we take a backhoe and we pull the fill out with the backhoe because it has no archaeological value. And a lot of times the Department of Transportation, they'd like to actually see a 1x1 dug by hand to that OSHA depth. So they'll dig a 1x1 down to that 5 feet or meter and a half and stop the hand excavations. And then we drop either a culvert pipe, or I actually prefer using a wooden trench boxes that I build. We drop that into the hole. We backfill around the trench box, leaving the center of the box or the pipe open. And then I can pull my machine up to that hole, and I drilled from the bottom of the 1x1 meter test pit to whatever depth we need. So this gets around to the problem of coarse fill, and it also, if the research design requires that at hand excavations, we can do that ahead and then still do the deep testing once they hit that 1.5 meter depth.
Yeah, sort of like a second check on ensuring that you've hit the depth that you're trying to get to, kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. So I guess probably one of the questions that comes up, and we've heard this a lot with like our own work, basically in my experience in CRM, the challenges around using mechanical devices in the field, and that's that. Mechanical screening and excavation, does it damage artifacts and features? And what is your experience with this? What's your thoughts on this? And so sort of more broadly for the listener, why, how do you kind of account for that challenge in the field?
Yeah. So what we're finding is that we've actually, the machine has lifted up potsherds that were like 4 inches across, undamaged. And that's surprising. There's a woman in New Brunswick that actually has a mechanical system as well. It works very different than mine. She did extensive research or study on damage. That was a big concern. And from my understanding is that it actually showed that the machine made less damage than hand testing. So shovels damage artifacts as well. A good example of this, I had a crew out along our river here in Pennsylvania some years ago, and at 116 centimeters deep, they hit a early archaic feature. The radiocarbon came back at dates that came back at 10,300 corrected. But they chopped the Kirk point in half with a shovel.
Oh.
Well. Yeah, it happens. Especially in phase one, where you're just kind of digging holes all day. 99% of the time there's nothing in them, and all of a sudden, whoops, what was that? Right. Yeah. And when you cut a wall with a shovel, you're cutting through potsherds, you're damaging, the groundstone tools with the shovels. Shovels are not damage free. So, the machine, if there's an artifact in the wall, it's particularly bigger things like FCR, it'll scar the FCR, thermally altered rock. We'll see that. Anything big that's hard to get in the bucket, it might do some damage. But the smaller artifacts, as far as usually flake stone tools, potsherds, we haven't really seen damage unless it's actually in the wall and it cut right at the wall.
Right. Have you done any kind of have you encountered features that have kind of been lifted up in the in one of these sections, or have you tested it sort of to see if it does kind of a bulk sample of a feature in any effective way? So on some of the sites where we know we have late woodland features right at the base of the plow zone, we'll actually stop right at that level and we'll check it first. And if there's a feature there, it depends on the circumstance, but usually if there's a feature there, we'll not dig that test pit because we don't want to wreck that feature. So we'll move on to the next, interval. Down deep, you'll go through the feature. Usually it turns up on the screens. Somebody say, hey, there's charcoal here, or there's FCR here, or the soil's a little redder. So we do recognize the features. We see it in the screen. But then afterwards, we can see it in the wall. I have a setup where we can, tools that get down the hole, we can scrape the walls, and then I run the camera down. We can see that we've actually identified features that way in the deeper sediments.
Could you describe the camera, Brian? I saw at the most recent ESAP meeting, I saw some folks I saw a video of you using the camera. It was very meta, but could you describe it for us?
So that was our first attempt. I made a little device to set the camera on, and I used my hand auger tools to connect to that, and we lowered it by hand down the hole and then back up. And that was the first, just kind of a proof of concept. So the next time we do this, I'll probably have some kind of a track that I can assemble to lower it more smoothly and maybe have real-time monitoring down the hole. So everything's a work in progress. So every time I'm out with the machine, we add something new, and then we take what we learn and improve upon it.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things we're working on right now.
And I'm guessing this camera helps with. I've got the page of the Maryland Archaeology project that the Paleo Digger had worked on last summer, and there's a nearly fully inverted Dr. Zach Singer in one of the test pits inspecting the stratigraphy. So
yeah. So it's easier to lower the camera than to lower Zach, I guess.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. We were a little concerned about him. He was all excited because we had a feature in that test pit. And we pulled charcoal out of the wall of that test pit. And we got a radiocarbon date that was early archaic. It was right above the Clovis level at 190 centimeters deep.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Very cool.
Well, since we're talking about the Barton site, one of the things I was struck by and have been struck by watching that project develop is the way you are using a variety of different technologies. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what sort of other technologies are kind of essential to use in the machine. Does the machine articulate both with, more traditional archaeological prospection techniques, which you've talked about a bit already, but especially other geophysical techniques you all are using?
So at the Barton site, and this is along the Potomac River in western Maryland, we not only use my machine, which we were able, because we're digging clear to the gravels in most cases, so we can see what the undulating gravel surface is. But then Dr. Dave Leslie brought, he had a low frequency GPR unit, so he can see deep into the sediments. So he was mapping out the structure of the floodplain, the gravel bars, where the back channels are, where the swales are, and so forth. And then he was also doing vibrocore sampling to add to that. So anytime you can add these different techniques together, it improves your resolution of the site and gives you a better understanding of the site and the deposits, so you can make decisions about where to excavate, with your more intensive hand excavations.
Yeah, I thought that was all very impressive. And you do a lot of GIS work as well, right, Brian?
Yes.
The images and stuff you guys are coming up with, and just the way it seems like you all have figured out a lot about that site. Since everyone since Henry Wright in the 60s or someone has been there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a known Clovis age site, and we've now have 31 deep test pits with the machine across that. So we're actually mapping out the distribution of that Clovis age occupation.
Cool.
Yeah,
both vertically and horizontally.
Yeah. So and is the goal there to sort of, once you guys have mapped out as you're going around and finding these little pockets, this is sort of where they'll target more in-depth excavation work after that?
That's the discussion right now. We're probably going to meet in January, and we're still in the early stages of figuring out how they're going to approach hand excavations, because taking even a 2x2 meter block down that deep is challenging. We're talking the Clovis age level is at about 2 meters. So it's
not like there's nothing on top of that.
Yeah, and there's and you have everything younger on top of that. From there's late woodland villages there as well, and everything else. So you got to deal with that as well. It was just the old stuff. You could just bring in a great awl and scoop it out and then get down to where you want to go, but you can't do that. You got to deal with everything.
Kaiser
else.
Villages get in the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of, the machine's sort of ideally suited for deep deposits like alluvial deposits, and knowing that these are on riverbanks and that sort of thing, does that pose limitations? Where are there places that you have wanted to go test with this machine? Like, it's on a skid steer, so you can probably get in, like, even when in sort of mushy soils, but I'm guessing there's, you got to really kind of target the time of year and the locations, and I'm guessing there's limitations on where you're able to get into depending upon like ground conditions, right?
Time of year hasn't been a problem. Actually, my first contract project with a machine was along the Susquehanna River. it got so cold during that project, the Susquehanna River completely froze over.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was like, it got so cold that we suspended operations for one day, and just to let it warm back up a little bit. So I've completed two projects in the winter, in January, for DOT, and then I had a project along the Roanoke River for American Electric Power, where the sites were on the floodplains, but now are islands within the lake for the hydroelectric facility. So these were early sites as well. They were flooded points and possibly pre-Clovis. And we had to load my machine and a hydraulic excavator onto a barge and take the equipment out across the lake. And then when we landed onto the island and I pulled the machines off, the barge operator radioed the dam operator and said, start lowering the water. So they were lowering the lake so we could drill the holes. They had other work they were doing as well, but that was part of it. So we had a 14-day window when the hydroelectric facility was in lockout, and we had to do that work in that 14. There's no other way you could get down 2 to 3 meters in 14 days to examine these sites.
That's really, that's a fascinating case study. Like, I immediately think of New Brunswick.
Storming Normandy. Oh,
yeah. Well, I immediately think of New Brunswick, like where, like there's a lot of hydroelectric dams, and one in particular, like a major one that is going under some repairs over the next few years. And, if they lower water, there's going to be exposing landscapes that have been submerged for, 50 plus years. And there's going to be piles of silt on top of these things that we know that there's intact archaeological sites down there, and there'd be no feasible way to reach those things without this kind of technology.
And these islands that I was digging my test pits on were underwater a few months earlier.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so we should. I'm going to ask you a question in a minute, or we'll ask you a question in a minute about your goals in the machine. But before we get to that, we should say that you have a grant program through Archaeology X that supported research using the Paleo Digger. And I think I've also, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, but you also have declined to put you haven't patented the machine or anything like that.
Well, actually, the patent, that's interesting. So I actually wrote a patent application and submitted it. And then I waited for the patent office to publish it, and then I public domained it.
Okay. Very cool.
Can you walk us through your thinking behind that a little bit?
Well, patents, the only people that make money on patents are patent attorneys. I mean, just go back and review the history of the Westinghouse and Edison fight and the Wright brothers. The patents, there are no patent police. If you want to protect a patent, you have to sue somebody and go to court. And if you don't have $50,000 sitting around, the patent attorney is going to well, we're not even going to touch that. So am I going to spend even, it takes about, I wrote the patent myself, so my only fees were the submission costs. But to do a patent the right way, you really should hire an attorney, and you're going to have at least $15,000 in attorney fees. I'd rather put that into the development of the machine.
Right.
And, I'm not going to sue anybody. Even if I had a patent, I'm not going to sue anybody to protect it.
And the reality is, there's only going to be 4 or 5 at most, probably other people that would even endeavor to build a similar machine, right?
If you want to build one of these, be my guest. Show me what you're doing, because I want to see it. We'll share notes, because maybe you'll come up with something that I didn't think of.
Yeah, and for the listener, you can find out about Archaeology X online. So it's just archaeologyx.com, and it's Archaeology X, all one word, archaeology spelled ARCHAEOLOGY.
So back to the grant program. If you can see how it works. Yeah, so the grant program, I put that out. The first year was in 2024, and I didn't really publicize it. I was looking for some research-oriented project, and I had talked to a number of folks, including people out at the Galt site and some other places. But it was the folks in Maryland, the Archaeological Society of Maryland, and Zach Singer in particular, who really said, "Hey, we would like to do this, and I can raise a crew." And so I financed the first the 2024 dig at Barton for bringing the machine in, because there's costs associated with bringing the machine. I rent the skid loader locally because it's cheaper to rent locally than to haul one in from our home base. And so I paid for the machine for 2024, and it was such a success that the Archaeological Society of Maryland actually raised the funds for 2025 to bring it back. They raised over $6,000 for the 2025 excavation of Barton. So now we have, with the 2 seasons there, we have over 31 test pits down through the Clovis age level, and most of those had artifacts down at that level.
That's pretty cool.
Fluted point in it yet?
No fluted points, but we have at least one end scraper. We have utilized flakes. I think we had two early stage bifaces. I think we had a wedge tool.
Nice.
So, yeah.
I remember seeing a video of Zach recovering something with great glee, but it looked like it was probably an archaic point. Is that right?
Yeah. We had archaic. Yeah, we had archaic points. We have archaic features, woodland features, pottery. It's all there.
Cool. What are your goals with the machine? Whether that's applications to particular research problems or some sort of development of the machine itself or some other technology?
Well, every time I go out with the machine, usually during the project, I already have a list going in the hotel room. I come back with a list of, okay, this has to be changed, that has to be added, we need to build this. So every time out, the success isn't as much as how well it did, but what we learned. So I'm constantly adding more to it and developing it. One of the things I'm working on is I have sensors on it, electronic sensors that measures the depth of the bucket as it's digging. And I built an 8-bit microprocessor unit that measures that depth and records the levels automatically. So when I go down 10 centimeters, once I bring it back up past 0, it automatically logs that level 1 as 0 to 10. And when I go back down, it starts counting from 10 to the next level, whether it be 20 or 23. It'll log that level 10 to 23. And then when I get that working well, that will precisely, you can really dial into the centimeter, the levels. And then when a test unit's done, I hit a button and it uploads that data log to my phone, and then I have a sub-meter GPS on top of the drill mast. It logs the location and the level data up to Esri field maps.
Wow. That's cool. So it's all built right into the machine now.
Yeah, built right in the machine. I wrote the software in C++.
Very cool. And so like you're immediately able to like export test pit profiles and everything like that, like right on the spot.
If a client wanted it, they could actually have the Esri files in real time, because once it uploads to the cloud, and
wow.
So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That is
now
cool.
I'm still getting that. The measuring is the hard part, getting it to measure accurately. So I'm still working with some issues with that, but once I get that working, it's going to really make it so I can dial in the levels to the centimeter.
Out of curiosity, like what sort of GPS and you're using? What's the new version of Esri's mobile? It's changed names a few times now.
It's Field Mapper, I think, Esri Field Mapper.
Okay.
Or Field Maps, something like that. And I use a Juniper Geode, GNS, which is what it actually mounts right on top of the drive head for the auger, so it's right over the hole.
Very cool. Yeah. So before we...
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Gabe.
Go ahead, Ken.
I was going to say, if we steer away from the paleo digger for a moment, before we were on here, Brian came on and his audio sounds incredibly sharp, and he recognized the brand and model of our microphones immediately. And so, Brian, you were saying that before getting into archaeology, you were touring through Western Pennsylvania. as a musician. Is that right?
Yeah, I played guitar in rock bands in the 80s through Western Pennsylvania, through the club circuit thing, among other things.
And then you decided that wasn't going to be a career, so decided to jump into CRM, eh?
No. So I grew up on a farm. I grew potatoes for Snyder's of Berlin potato chips, and did that into my 20s. And then we lost a crop and we were unable to continue the farm. So we actually went into the mining business. I surface mined coal for 10 years, which was long enough to pay off all the debts from the farm. That was the purpose of the mining business. And then once we were done, once the farm debts were paid off, I closed down the mining business, and that's when I had just enough left over to go to school. I went to Clarion University and pursued archaeology and geology.
Neat, very cool.
So did the coal interest lead into your interest in geology? Were those related?
Well, I grew up. Our farm. I was the 8th company to mine on our farm. So every like these mineral resources, they mine till the current technology doesn't allow to go any deeper. We had underground mining, surface mining, and through the years, this technology changes. It opens up new reserves. So we mined coal in our farm, and also on some other farms that I had. But I always tied mining of the coal to reclamation of abandoned mine lands. So there was always abandoned mine lands being reclaimed with the remining. And it didn't make a lot of money, but it made enough to pay off all the farm debts and be able to do two undergrad degrees, all paid for.
Very impressive.
And this is where the ability to essentially develop an entirely new technology and program the paleo digger. This is where this comes from. Is keeping tractors on the farm and everything like that, eh?
Yes. We when on the farm, we built a lot of our own farm equipment, and then the mining equipment was the same thing, just bigger. And building the machine was actually my father and I. So it was an excuse for me to go back to the farm and spend time with my father.
Great.
Very cool.
Yeah. Would you like to tell us the specific Sons of Italy hall you were playing when you decided to go back to school?
I don't know. That was a hard thing to do, to go back to school and leave the farm.
Yeah, I bet.
Can you, I guess to sort of bring it back to the paleo digger here, just as we're sort of wrapping up, this has all been a lot to think about, and we really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. But can you tell us like a particular case study where you feel like this machine's been really successful, and that you think holds a lot of promise for it? Maybe that's Barton, but I know from the guys at PennDOT, they're real happy with it too.
Yes, PennDOT. The projects I've completed for PennDOT, I've done 3 now that were contract archaeology projects that solved a really big problem for them. They needed to go 4 meters deep, and one of the problems with road construction development is that they want to explore all the potential corridors before they decide on which corridor they're going to build the road or move the road to. And they don't want to buy or eminent domain those properties prior to deciding which corridor they want to go to. So their ability to do step back excavations where they open up large, that's really difficult with landowners. People don't want you tearing up their entire front yard to go down and test, to get a single test pit down 4 meters. So this solves a problem where we're able to have a low impact on the surface and still get those deep tests. And then that gives the DOT their information they need to make their decisions about where they want to build the road. But
sort of minimally invasive and kind of disrupts the private landowners as much as possible.
Yes. Yeah. And it gets around all these problems, with OSHA requirements. I don't want to be in it makes me nervous to even be in a test pit down 1.5 meters. Yeah, I don't like to bend down and scrape the floor at that depth because it's dangerous being in a test pit that deep. Mm-hmm. This eliminates that. We're not putting people in the hole using the machine. and still be able to see the artifacts and what's down there. But Barton's been the most successful so far because we're on a known Paleo-Indian site, and it's exciting. I mean, when you're finding artifacts, CRM is a lot of empty holes. But when you go to a site like Barton, where you're going to find stuff, it's very exciting. And that's why we had this past season at Barton, we had up to 40 volunteers working with us. It attracts that much attention. So
I guess the last question I wanted to ask you is, you can go down about 4 meters in a 50 centimeter diameter pit, which is a massive volume of dirt coming out of that hole. And if you don't find anything in there, does the paleo digger put it all back in, or is that still manual labor?
It's still manual labor shoveling it, but it actually goes, 3 people can shovel it back in pretty quick.
Yeah.
It's not that big of a burden. And there's usually, when you're moving between holes, there's usually, if the screeners are caught up, there's somebody can, usually take care of that. So that's one of the things. In CRM, I'm not replacing the crew, the traditional CRM crew. Typically a CRM company will hire me for the specific problem of deep testing. I need their crew to help me run the machine. Right. So I'm not displacing their workers. They become part of the operation, and I make their crew more efficient at collecting actually better data than they could have done collected by hand.
Yeah, make their reports writing a little bit easier too. That's,
yes.
If it's all ready by the end of the day.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great, Brian.
Yeah. So I still measure by hand. I still believe in traditional tools, but we measure the whole depth of every level just to make sure that everything's right. But yeah.
Very cool.
Fantastic.
Well,
and we're going to
Brian, this has been great.
Sorry, Ken. We're going to make sure to link the you've got that video from Barton, and we'll make sure to link your YouTube page as well.
Okay.
Yeah. This has been fantastic. It's really fascinating, and I've seen these presentations a couple of times. So, looking forward to meeting maybe at the next ESAF.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, I'll keep an eye out for you guys.
Yeah. Awesome. Terrific talking to you, Brian. We really appreciate you sharing the information with our
thanks again.
Okay, thanks for having me.